This is week 167 of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. I'm Anna Belokur, reporting to you from Kyiv, and I'll be taking you through the top stories from Ukraine this week. Thursday was Victory in Europe Day, marking the 80th anniversary of the day in 1945 when the Nazis surrendered to Allied forces, ending World War II on the European continent. President Volodymyr Zelensky delivered an address from Kyiv's central Hrshadik Street, walking alongside mid-morning pedestrian traffic as he commemorated the heroes who died in the fight against Nazism, and those who continue the fight today. Russia, on the other hand, celebrates Victory Day on May 9th, and the original sentiment behind the holiday has become a little convoluted over there. Rather than celebrating peace and unity among European nations, over the last few decades, Victory Day has become more of a tool for Russian President Vladimir Putin to espouse Russia-centric imperial propaganda while showing off the largest volume of military equipment possible. There's a lot to unpack about this year's Victory Day, so we'll start with an update on that ceasefire I mentioned last week. If you recall, Russia announced on April 28th that they were declaring a unilateral ceasefire from May 8th to 11th out of respect for the holiday. This proposal came after the conclusion of a month-long partial ceasefire on energy infrastructure that Russia broke immediately and repeatedly throughout the duration. Ukraine was obviously skeptical of Russia's intent to uphold this new proposed truce, and understandably annoyed at the idea that Russia deserves peaceful skies for a military parade when the citizens of Ukraine live in constant terror, especially on holidays. In rejecting the proposed three-day ceasefire, President Zelensky warned that Ukraine could not guarantee the safety of any foreign representatives in Russia between May 8th and 11th, sparking speculation that Ukraine planned to launch aerial attacks on Russia within that time span. As such, both Ukraine and Russia amped up aerial strikes in the days leading up to Thursday the 8th, including an extremely loud strike on Kyiv early on Wednesday. And by early, I mean 1 a.m. In return, several of Moscow's airports were shut down due to drone strikes in the days leading up to the parade, proving that Ukraine was indeed capable of hitting the Russian capital. Russia announced plans to turn off the internet in Moscow during the parade on May 9th, under the pretense of safety, the idea being that if no one in the capital could access the internet, the GPS on Ukrainian drones wouldn't be able to either. Unlike Zelensky, Putin certainly wasn't going to address his people from the streets. In the end, Friday's surveillance-ridden parade went off without incident. Notable world leaders in attendance included Chinese President Xi Jinping, Brazilian President Lula, Serbian President Alexander Vučić, and Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, among about 24 others. Xi's presence was by far the most talked about, and comes on the back of the revelation that hundreds of Chinese nationals are fighting alongside Russian forces against Ukraine. While in Moscow, Xi released a joint statement with Putin saying that they are committed to strengthening cooperation in the face of Washington's course of dual containment of Russia and China. The two leaders also swore to contribute to the establishment of peace in Ukraine while addressing the root causes of the war. Guys, the call is coming from inside the house. Moscow's Victory Day celebrations concluded on Friday night with a large display of red and orange fireworks that allegedly terrified locals because the color scheme was so similar to that of a drone strike. Poor choices by the event planners aside, no Ukrainian strikes disrupted the day, as Russia had feared. Yesterday morning, the leaders of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Poland traveled to Ukraine in a show of solidarity. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk criticized his peers who had attended Friday's parade in Moscow, calling it a shame for everyone present there. The leaders' visit coincided with increased intelligence that a large attack on Kyiv might be imminent, drawing into sharp focus the sham of Putin's so-called truce. And to reiterate that point, the European Union issued a statement yesterday saying that it endorses a full unconditional 30-day ceasefire proposed by Trump, calling on Russia to agree. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov commented shortly after that Russia will continue to reject the proposal as long as the West continues to ship weapons to Ukraine, claiming that otherwise it will play to Ukraine's advantage. He added that without the sort of diplomatic solution that Putin allegedly seeks, Russia has no choice but to continue the war. Again, the statement about addressing root causes of the conflict feels bitterly ironic. At the Kyiv Independent, reader contributions are our main source of revenue. Shows like Ukraine This Week are only made possible by viewers like you. If you'd like to get more involved in the Kyiv independent community, we would love to have you along. There will be a link to our membership page in the description below. I'd also like to thank everyone who donates directly via YouTube. Your support is greatly appreciated. The European Union has proposed a sweeping new ban on all Russian gas sales to all 27 of its member states, which aims to completely cease imports by the end of 2027. The full-scale invasion marked a turning point for the sale of Russian natural resources in Europe. Many countries scaled back their reliance on Russian oil and gas, hoping to avoid both dependence on an increasingly hostile neighbor and inadvertent funding of Russia's war machine. Since 2021, Russian gas imports have fallen from 45% to 19% of the EU's overall import volume, but billions of dollars have still flowed to Russia in the years since the full-scale war started, and even grew slightly between 2023 and 2024. Last year, the EU spent an estimated 23 billion euros on Russian fossil fuels, a total higher than its contributed military support for Ukraine. Although many welcome the idea of total independence from Russian energy, there have been some notable holdout countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, who claim that they can't stop importing Russian gas without placing undue cost on their citizens. Countries in this category include Slovakia and Hungary, who maintain the friendliest relationship with Russia out of all EU countries. Under the proposal unveiled this week, no new contracts for Russian gas, LNG, and nuclear fuel imports will be made between the EU and Russia through the end of this year. All existing long-term contracts must be terminated by the end of 2027, with extra measures taken to crack down on the covert shipping methods that allow Russia to circumvent restrictions. By the end of this year, each member state must submit a roadmap for how they plan to phase out Russian gas on schedule. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on Tuesday that energy that comes to our continent should not pay for a war of aggression against Ukraine, and we owe this to our citizens, to our companies, and to our brave Ukrainian friends. European Commissioner for Energy Dan Jurgensen was more unequivocal in his words, saying that the plan represents the wishes of a qualified majority, and that unlike in the case of sanctions, the bloc doesn't need a unanimous vote to adopt it. He added, "We expect all countries, even if they don't agree with the decision, to live up to the law." This is a huge win for Ukraine, who has long urged Europe to cease any and all funding of Russia's war machine. Such a drastic maneuver won't be totally straightforward. The EU still has to find a way to compensate for the gap in imports without triggering widespread economic issues. But when it comes to brokering peace, this move is a clear sign of where the EU's allegiance lies. Removing restrictions and resuming former import volumes has been a key demand of Moscow before it's willing to end its war, and Europe is signaling that it won't be cowed into submission, now or in the future. As I mentioned earlier, the lead-up to Victory Day this year was marked by intense strikes by both sides, including a many hours-long Russian attack on Kyiv overnight on Wednesday. My colleague Yulia went to the site of the attack, and I'll let her show and tell you more about it.
Russia launched a missile and drone attack on Kyiv overnight on May 7th, killing 2 people and injuring 8 others, including 4 children. Around 1 a.m., the capital was rocked by a series of explosions as ballistic missiles targeted the city. A few hours later, Russian attack drones could be heard flying overhead. Drones and debris struck several residential buildings. We are at the site of a drone attack in Shevchenkivsky district. Here, the bodies of 2 people, a mother and her son, were found after the drone struck a 5-story residential building.
Did you see the ceasefire? We talk about that already less than 1 year. It's in almost every day we have attack, kamikaze drone missiles attack into our hometown. And tonight, 2 people died and 4 people hospitalized.
Pete Hegseth has had a colorful run thus far as Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense. The former Fox News host is perhaps most criticized for his habit of sharing national security plans over unsecured texting apps, and he's certainly getting a lot of flack for the not one, but two $60 billion fighter jets that fell off aircraft carriers into the sea this month. But there was another huge headline that made a big stir in Ukraine earlier this week. Reuters reported on Tuesday that America's temporary halt of military aid to Ukraine in early February was ordered verbally by Hegseth without the knowledge or approval of the White House, Pentagon, or State Department. The weapons in question had been approved under former President Joe Biden and authorized by Congress, and the canceled flights reportedly cost U.S. Transportation Command $2.2 million. Although the halt only lasted 3 days because allegedly now former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz stepped in and reversed it, it caused huge anxiety here in Ukraine and across Europe, and was a serious blow to Ukraine's trust in America in the first weeks of Trump's second term. Trump himself apparently didn't hear about the halt until Ukraine and its allies reacted to the news. Just like the fact that he leaked war plans in an unsecure group chat, the revelation that Hegseth ordered such a jarring move without proper authorization doesn't bode well for the Trump administration's inner workings. In a comment to Reuters after the story first broke this week, the White House said that Hegseth had been following the directive of President Trump when he gave the order, although they had no explanation for why Trump and other top officials who should have been involved in the order had no knowledge of it until after the fact, or why it was so quickly reversed after an intervention by Waltz. When asked about the incident in a press conference on Tuesday, White House spokesperson Carolyn Leavitt said that the road to peace between Russia and Ukraine is complex and fluid, declining to comment on the specifics of what transpired and who was responsible. She concluded with, "The bottom line is that the war is much closer to an end today than it was when President Trump took office." As Ukraine civilians mourn their recently killed families and friends, and Ukrainian troops report ongoing attacks along the front line during Putin's so-called Victory Day ceasefire, it's hard to see the endpoint that Trump and his team think that we're fast approaching. For our member question this week, we have this. Should we have a callback to the stork drama now that there are baby storks? So I will give a quick recap of the drama to bring us all up to speed. In March, Ukrainians watched eagerly for the return of Hrytsko and Odarka, a celebrity stork couple who return annually to their nest in Poltava Oblast, where a live cam has been installed for several years. Anticipation turned to glee when both storks returned. Glee turned to shock when it was revealed that the male stork was not the beloved Hrytsko of years prior, but a younger interloper. Over time, some members of the public have come to accept this new pairing, while others continue to refer to Odarka as something of a floozy. As our reader said, however, there's been a significant addition to the nest: baby storks. In preparation for answering this question, I watched footage of Odarka and her new partner regurgitating food, preening, and sitting on their children, which are roughly the size of tennis balls. Both storks seem to be involved parents, and the romantic drama seems to have taken a back seat for now. That's all for this week. We'll be back next Sunday with more news from Ukraine. If you enjoyed this video, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent community. It's thanks to viewers like you that we can do this work, and we're so grateful for your support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.